I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Shea.
More than 4 decades after the notorious 1971 prison uprising, the upstate New York prison Attica is back in the news this week. 3 guards at Attica prison have pleaded guilty to brutally beating an inmate, but they themselves will not spend time behind bars. Sergeant Sean Warner, Officer Keith Swack, and Officer Matthew Rademacher are accused of breaking both legs of George Williams, as well as his shoulder, his eye socket, and his ribs. The beating took place 3 years ago in front of other prisoners, but it only came to light when Williams had to be taken to a hospital outside Attica to treat his injuries. On Monday, each guard pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of misconduct. In exchange for quitting their jobs, they were spared any jail time. They'll also be allowed to keep their pensions. This marks the first time a prison guard in New York has been criminally charged with a non-sexual assault of a prisoner. It's also the first time in state history a guard has pleaded guilty to committing an unauthorized violent act against a prisoner while on duty.
More than 2,200 men are walled inside Attica, and reports of guards using force against them are up 25% in the last 4 years. The maximum security prison has few security cameras. Prosecutors in the case say this has let guards and prisoners get away with violence. This is First Assistant District Attorney Vincent Hemming of Wyoming County in New York.
I do not fathom why we don't have cameras in the hallways of Attica, in blocks of Attica. Cameras in Attica will protect both Attica inmates and it will protect corrections officers, but it will protect the truth more than anything else.
Meanwhile, others have called for Attica prison to be shut down. This comes as a 4th officer who beat Williams saw his charges dropped after he testified before a grand jury and is now back to work at his old job. All of this is detailed in an explosive new investigation headlined, "A Brutal Beating Wakes Attica's Ghosts." A prison infamous for bloodshed faces a reckoning as guards go on trial. It was reported by our guest, Tom Robbins, with the Marshall Project, published in collaboration with the New York Times, a big front-page spread on Sunday. The Marshall Project is a nonprofit news outlet focused on criminal justice issues, named after the late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. We're also joined by Antonio Yarbo, who served 20 years at Attica prison. He was convicted for a triple murder he did not commit, was released last year after he was fully exonerated. We welcome both of you to Democracy Now! Tom, let's begin with you on the Williams case. Just lay it out for us.
This was an incident in the summer of 2011 that took place on C Block, which Antonio will tell you is one of the toughest places in Attica, an already very tough maximum security prison. And guards went to the cell of George Williams, 29-year-old from New Jersey, who was serving a 2 to 4 year sentence for robbing a couple of jewelry stores, and took him down the hall to a day room and told him that they were bringing him there for a drug test. And as he was walking into the room, all of a sudden he felt someone clobber him on the ribs on the right side, knocked him to the ground, and then he was all of a sudden assaulted by and pummeled by kicks and batons. And he said somebody jumped on his ankle. He said he opened his eyes at one point and saw an officer taking a step back, aiming a kick at his face. Like he said, it was like getting a football punter. I mean, an incredibly brutal beating that his screams pleading for his life were so loud that inmates 2 floors below heard him. People I talked to at Attica said, yeah, we heard him that night. About a day later, after he was taken to the solitary initially, and then he was
Didn't the guard there say?
The guard there said, you know, we're not going to take him in here like that. We're going to send you to the infirmary. And at the infirmary, a nurse said, we can't handle him here. You've got to go to an outside hospital. And at the hospital, doctors had to use a plate and 6 screws to reset one of his legs. He was operated on. And the thing that happened that was different with this case was that an investigation began. And the investigation was began by the Department of Corrections Inspector General, but then state police joined it. And it led ultimately to criminal charges filed by the district attorney in Wyoming County, where Attica is located, this small rural community up there near Buffalo. And they charged 4 officers initially with gang assault, which is a statute that's normally used against gangs inside a prison, Bloods and Crips and Latin Kings and whatnot. And they faced up to 25 years on that. They were also charged with felony counts of evidence tampering and misfilings. And the case lingered for about 3 years.
And the officers claimed the justification for the beating was what, the suspicion that he had weapons on him?
Yes, that was the officer's account.
But what did prisoners see? People, I mean, they did this right in front of a number of prisoners, right, who were...
There were prisoners located across the hall from the day room that they were able to see what was going on. And the prisoners described that they jumped on him as soon as he came into the day room. One of them said that he counted as many as 50 kicks and a dozen thwacks from these long batons that the officers carry. And another one said that when George Williams was picked up because he couldn't walk, he thought he was wearing a red shirt and then realized that he was just drenched in blood. They also saw him brought to the stairs. And when Williams said, "I can't walk down the stairs, my ankles are broken," he was shoved from behind, and he was handcuffed at the time. So he fell down. And at the bottom of the stairs, I'm sorry, the story gets worse. At the bottom of the stairs, someone grabbed his head and smashed it against the wall. And they left him standing there for quite a long time until one of the rules in Attica when you're taken to solitary, which is where they're going to take him next, is that there's supposed to be a camera crew that records it. It's supposed to be a separate detail of guards. And he heard them shout, "The cameras are coming." And then one of the guards picked up what George Williams said was a dirty, wet mop and wiped his face to wipe the blood off it before he was taken to the solitary. I mean, it's such a gruesome story. And yet, what really struck me in the time that I spent in Attica getting this story was that it's not surprising to the inmates there. They said it happens all the time.
So explain how it went from felony charges of this gang assault to they won't be serving any time in jail just this week, this plea bargain.
There were innumerable hearings and changes in the case over the last 3 years. Initially, it was thrown out on a technicality. It was represented to a new grand jury by the district attorney up there. Finally ready for trial this past week, and at the last minute, the defendants decided that they would take a deal that had been on the table, actually, for more than 2 years that provided, as you'd said, for them no jail time in exchange for pleading guilty and quitting their jobs. Essentially, the criminal sanction is very little. When I jumped the turnstile when I was a kid, I got a conditional discharge as long as I stayed out of trouble for a year. I didn't lose my job, but the district attorney in Wyoming County was the first one to ever bring this case. It's not popular amongst the constituents who elect him, so it definitely took some nerve for him to do it.
And what was George Williams' reaction to the settlement, so far as you know?
He's clearly disappointed that there was no jail time, but I think he's relieved to put this behind him at this point. I don't think he was looking forward to being on the stand and being grilled by top defense attorneys, which the union had helped these guards raise funds for them, who were all set to grill George and other inmate witnesses.
Before we go to the history of Attica, Antonio Yarborough, you're quoted in Tom's piece. You were at Attica for how long?
20 years.
The full 2 decades.
2 decades, yes.
Convicted of a triple murder, then fully exonerated and released.
Right.
The C block that Tom's describing, yes, you lived on.
No, I lived in D block, but I also spent time in C block, A block. It depends what type of program that you want to select while you're there. Put you in whatever block that they put you in.
So what was the D block that you were in?
D block, I worked in a metal shop. You can work as a porter, or you can work as school porter or something like that. C block, is more notorious, so nobody really wants to go there. It's the laundry and the hospital that, you go there and work there if you want to be in C block. Yeah.
And could you describe what the conditions were in Attica for those 20 years?
It's like Tom was saying, it's a horrifying situation because you wake up not knowing what today's going to bring you. And when I mean what today's going to bring you, not what the person that you lock next door to, but with the officers. Because they have this culture there that, this attitude that everybody that comes from the city, I come from the city, the 5 boroughs, you know what I'm saying, either they slicksters or they gang members or, they're there for what the paper says that they're there for. And the majority of the time, none of it is true, or half of it is true. And, you know, and so straight out the gate, they let you know what type of situation that you're coming into. And they let you know you're coming into a vital situation. Whereas that if you come in there, one of the first speeches I ever got was, if you F up, excuse me, I don't want to curse, but if you F up, you're going to get F'd up. You know, they tell you that right out the gate. You know what I'm saying? You do what our officers tell you to do. You don't question them and none of that, you know. And so you know what you're getting into, or you know what you're going into the moment that you arrive there. You know, they take you, they pull you to the side, outside the presence of other inmates or prisoners, and you know, they surround you with four or five guards, you know what I'm saying, and they give you the threat speech right out the gate. So you already know what you're entering the moment that you get there. And so that's what happened with me. When I first arrived there, I was 145 pounds soaking wet. I have never been in trouble, so all this stuff was extremely new to me. But you know the history of Attica from watching, you know, the story about Attica, the riot. So going there, you're already afraid. Then when you get in there, you know, they lay the hammer down, you know, this is what it is, you know what I'm saying? So.
And this history of Attica that people all over the country might not know, what happened at another September 11th, between September 9th and 13th, 1971.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm glad about this story is that it's familiarized a new generation with what was one of the most hideous incidents, I think, in American history, certainly in the last century.